Today on the Lib Dem podcast, we're talking to Alistair Carmichael, the MP for Orkney and Shetland. Hello and welcome to the Lib Dem podcast. We're here with another fantastic opportunity to hear from one of the leaders of our party, and we're delighted to be joined by Alistair Carmichael, live from Orkney, isn't it? I think you live. Is that right, Alistair? Yes. So, Alistair, for those who don't know, if you don't know, how ridiculous, how could you not know this, that he's been the MP for Orkney and Shetland since 2001, nearly 20 years, Alistair. That's some service. I think 6 general elections as well now.
All gone in the beating of a heart.
And of course, we have the ever-present Richard Kemp from Liverpool, as well as my colleague and sidekick.
And how many elections has he been through?
Don't start, but my last term started in 1992, and I'd already done one before then. So. But I am a lot older than you, he says, trying to crawl to the chief whip.
And obviously, Richard just mentioned Alistair is also the chief whip. He was a minister during coalition. But first of all, we want to talk specifically to Alistair about how MPs like him are coping with the coronavirus. How is it affecting businesses in his area, people in his area? Are they completely run off their feet? So, Alistair, how has the crisis affected your residents?
Well, for people living in my community, the issue has been much the same as everyone else. It's interesting to see the contrast between Shetland on the one hand, which got cases early on and has seen a more rapid growth, than Orkney, which was much later to have confirmed cases. There are some opportunities in a smaller community with shorter lines of communication, with also that stronger sense of community. You've got an instinctive response of people to sort of look out for their neighbours, to rally around, and we don't just do that at a moment of crisis. You've still got a habit of doing that socially in places like Orkney and in Shetland. But the essence of the problem is still the same. We have to follow the same rules of lockdown as everyone else. So the impact on our businesses is the same. And in fact, in many ways, it's more acute because we've got an economy here that is built predominantly on small and medium-sized enterprises. Mm-hmm. We've got a really large number of people with their own small business, working from home, self-employed, ticking all the boxes of the different areas where people are in danger of falling through the net at the moment. And, the volume of casework in the last 3 weeks has just gone through the roof. And, what has been interesting, I think, you saw in the early days a big influx of emails, letters saying what is happening, what help is there going to be for my business. Now the volume is down, but the complexity of the casework is greatly increased. So not as many emails, but it's people saying this scheme exists, but it's not going to work for me because of this reason, that reason, or the other reason.
And I mean, we're starting to get a lot more coming through about delays in things like the business grants and stuff, and the money, and particularly from the banks themselves, actually giving out these kind of grants and loans to make sure businesses continue. How much pressure have you been getting, or how much pressure have you been putting on the government to say, look, you've assigned this money, but it's not actually getting out there?
There's a balance to be struck here. I think we all understand that there was an interest in getting announcements out the door because we knew that they had to give confidence that there would be support there for people. So I think we all knew that the schemes that were created 2, 3, 4 weeks ago were always going to be a work in progress. Now that the gaps are becoming apparent, then the pressure has got to be maintained to make sure that these gaps get filled. Because when the political pressure is at its height, that that's when you've got the maximum opportunity for screwing money out the treasury. And as there's a sort of inversely proportionate relationship between the amount of pressure that is on Treasury from the number of concessions that they will make. They've responded well, but in many ways it's been counterintuitive to how Treasury in particular tends to work.
One of the things that is intriguing me at the moment is the way that we're learning to do things differently. So, for example, last night we had our first ever virtual group meeting, and we're looking at ways of doing things like this. You represent an area that's very difficult to talk to your constituents anyway, just because of the spread of them. Are you thinking of using Zoom and having virtual town halls in some of your small villages in a different way because of the experience you've got over the last month?
Yeah, absolutely. Now, to be honest, Richard, I've never been a fan of video conferencing in the past, because if you are in Orkney or in Shetland and you join a video conference with people in Inverness or Edinburgh, and they're all sitting round the table, and you are the moaning voice on the wall on the screen, then you're pretty marginalised, and you don't have the opportunities to read the body language round the table. You miss out on the water cooler chat, the sidebar conversations before and after the meeting, where actually an awful lot of business is done. And for that reason, I've always been a bit resistant. What I noticed, though, is that when everybody is at home, there is no meeting table in Edinburgh or Inverness that you're removed from. The dynamics of video conferencing become very, very different. And yes, it does give you opportunities. One of the things I moved to doing early doors was, never mind video conferencing, because of course I've got communities in Orkney and in Shetland that will not, the broadband service will not sustain Zoom links and the rest of it. So we just set up twice weekly telephone surgeries. So on a Tuesday for surgery, 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, it's out there, it's on social media, it's well advertised, the local radio stations carry it and the rest of it, so that you are more easily and more readily and regularly available. Because we are the sort of communities that we are, people have always been in the habit of just lifting the phone or sending an email anyway. Especially in the smaller islands. Liam and I will maybe get to them all once or at most twice a year. So you're not going to wait for a surgery. So you fire off an email or you make a phone call to the office or whatever. And it's just about maintaining that, I guess, rather than anything else.
Yes, I think this will complement what we do, not replace it. And I'm lucky, about 5% of my ward live on the road that I live in. And I'm watching a family exchanging books. We set up a book exchange in our front, and I see people regularly. It's a lot easier for us.
Yeah, I mean, look, the real test will not be in the communities, because I think people are open-minded when it comes to communities, and they are, they're not hidebound by lots of rules and procedures and precedents and the rest of it. The real test will be getting this used in the Palace of Westminster, in the House of Commons.
Our town halls, Alistair.
Oh, indeed, yeah, absolutely, for exactly the same reasons as well. Yeah. The innate conservatism of political establishments, wherever you find them, is a quite awesome beast when you see it. For years we've been pushing for a bit of modernisation in the House of Commons. When we vote now, just in the last few years, we've gone to a system where when you pass the clerks to record your name, it's done in an iPad rather than a sheet of paper with a marker pen. So hallelujah for progress there. But get this, they have still got the 3 alphabet lanes for each iPad. So you've got H to one, H to M and another, and N to Z in the third. And I'm saying, but wait a minute, it's an iPad. Couldn't we just have... So there's always a sort of gap in the H to M for some reason, they either vote more quickly or there's not as many of them or whatever. I don't know. But, couldn't we just have 3 fast-flowing queues? But no, that's been resisted so far. So, that's the context. Now, suddenly, we're going from that to something that will see ministers being questioned remotely, and business of the House of Commons being done online, and it's an opportunity, and I think this is something that not just politics but business, family life, in all sorts of different ways is going to have to think about in those stray moments for the next few weeks. A lot of the change that we are experiencing is good, and we will want to keep it on the other side of the crisis. And it's deciding where that, do we want to go back to business as usual? Because frankly, business as usual was pretty poor for the planet. We weren't, incremental change wasn't happening in relation to carbon reduction and climate change. It encouraged inequality, and it barred social progress, social mobility. So, business as usual, no, I'm not really keen on going back to business as usual. We have changed an awful lot of things just in the last few weeks, and we want to keep the best of these changes because actually a lot of them were very necessary and overdue.
Yeah, and in fact, for all 3 of us from the north, you're from the very far north, but one of the things that seems to me the opportunity to do is wrest control from Westminster and Whitehall more generally. If we can communicate across the northwest, John and I and colleagues, why do we do things in our party in a very Westminster-centric way, and why is Westminster Westminster-centric anyway?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fairness to the party, we've been sort of slowly coming to terms with video conferencing and telephone conferencing for things like federal board and federal committees for a long time. But the familiarity and the ease with which we now are using the technological answers to distance, I think is one of the opportunities that we can take from all this. Always going back though to the caveat that the way in which you use technology has got to be with a purpose in mind.
Yes.
The sort of the parallel that I would offer you is in Orkney and Shetland, we always have this ongoing debate about, could we build fixed links, tunnels and bridges between the different islands? And we point to the example of the Faroes, where they have linked nearly all the islands together now with a fantastic network of tunnels. If you're not careful, then these tunnels become a mechanism by which the council or the government at the centre of the community pools control and resources in from the edge and centres everything at the council the headquarters in the island capital, and that's the danger. Whereas if you use these tunnels as an opportunity to push power and influence and service provision out from the centre to a better even spread across your community, then actually you've done some good with that tool. The same will be true of the use of modern technology going ahead. If you use it to push that power and influence out, then it's a force for good. If it becomes a means by which people on the periphery, and I hate the term, but people on the periphery are marginalised, then frankly it will only accelerate the downward spiral.
And can I just move this on now, because you just talked a little bit about Westminster. So as Chief Whip, how's life in the parliamentary party? How are you guys coping with having a coordinated response? And coupled to that, you've got several MPs thinking about there may be a leadership election coming up as well. So that's quite a lot for you as Chief Whip to have to handle and make sure people are staying on page.
Well, I've been Chief Whip for parliamentary parties of varying sizes between 8 and 57. We're currently settled, unfortunately, at 11, but the size of the group does not seem to have any bearing on the amount of effort it takes to manage it. I think that's just one of the truths about Liberals. I picked up my copy of Liberator yesterday, and they said maybe he doesn't want to lead the party because he knows it too well. There's more than a grain of truth in that, let me tell you.
Well, there's two leaders here who might be regretting it, Alistair.
So, I mean, what's it like at the moment? The dynamic in the party is pretty good. You know, the particular chemistry of the 11 that we have is good. It's positive. We've got a good quality group at the moment. There's nobody nobody is pulling in their own direction, if you know what I mean, which is always enormously helpful. I hope that the leadership election won't have an adverse impact on that. We're all very alive to that possibility, so that's, you know, something that we're keeping. We're making a conscious effort to manage. Let me tell you, the fact that as things stand, you have a leadership election that could run until my birthday in July next year is utter nonsense. It is madness, and it will make the management of that election 100 times more difficult than it needs to be. I understand the reasons why the federal board took the decision that they did. I think, though, they focused too much on the sensible procedural managerial reasons and not enough on the politics. I'm hopeful that there might be an opportunity, given a very recent federal appeals panel ruling, that the federal board might be prepared to have another look at that one, because it's not in the party's best interest to be running it in that way. And I think it's an unnecessary burden that we are putting on ourselves at a time when, you know, Liberals are most relevant to the political debate at a time of change, and it's pretty clear that we are coming into a time of change, and that should be an opportunity for us to be out there with a distinctive message, you know, saying something that does actually give people a vision of how we can be doing things differently in the future. But for that, you need a leader to set the direction. An interim leader can't, and any interim leader that tried to would be accused quite rightly of abusing his or her position as an interim leader.
Yeah, it's interesting, the things we've been talking about today that will change: communications, neighbourhoods and community, the green environment, devolution, are all moving the agenda onto our place in politics. And this is a golden opportunity for us to take advantage of it.
It's also a frustrating time because all the focus principally in this short period is always going to be on the government. It'll be on ministers and daily press conferences, and actually at a time when it would be inappropriate to be too adversarial or confrontational or partisanly political, then, you know, it's difficult actually to get coverage. But that phase will not last forever.
Yes.
And, you know, once that phase is through, then I think we have got an opportunity to cut into the political debate and to shape not just our own party, actually, but also the direction of travel in the Labour Party. Because you've got a new leadership there, which will have some instincts that are close to our own, which will have other instincts that we would not want to be within a country mile of. So, you know, if we are shaping the broader debate, then we have an opportunity to shape the debate in the other two parties. One of the big frustrations for me in the last few years is that the absence of a large Liberal Democrat presence has meant that the Labour Party has felt emboldened in going off to the hard left, and the Tories have become a sort of, you know, right-wing nationalist force. You need a strong Liberal Democrat presence I say the centre not because it's a sort of soggy split the difference option, but you need that mainstream place where most people in Britain are to be pulling these two forces into the middle. And we've not had that, however much we've tried to recreate it. And this is a moment where we can exert the influence, even just with 11 MPs, but with the network that we've got in the party across the country, in local government, in the Scottish Parliament, Kirsty Williams in the Welsh Assembly, our colleagues in the London Assembly.
So, and you've talked about times of change. This is whatever happens directly after the crisis, and we can't ignore the fact that Scotland is going through its own kind of time for change. And you were heavily involved in the 2016 in-out referendum. Now, what happens to Scotland in the next year is key, not just for Scotland, but for the whole of the Union. And, particularly with those elections next year as well, where the SNP will be looking for a mandate for a second Scottish independence referendum. How is that affecting you guys that are pro-union, but also dealing with the fact you can't campaign at the moment either, or your campaign's very much limited?
Well, in that regard, in the campaigning aspects, then, everybody's in the same situation. So we are having to find different and, a bit more creative ways of doing that. It's fascinating how Brexit and now this pandemic could impact that debate. I would say that both these forces show the importance of countries working together, and Brexit, I think, demonstrates the importance of countries working together in trading terms, political terms, building ever closer links. The global pandemic actually shows some of the threats that come with these opportunities, because we move around the world at a pace and to an extent that would have been unthinkable a generation ago. And that's been the social aspect of globalization that has also come with a technological aspect of globalization that we've, as politicians, not really got our mind around. So I think, I hesitate to predict anything about politics anywhere, and especially in Scotland. But I think that the case for countries working together, for building bridges between countries rather than breaking them up, is stronger than it has ever been. And, for nationalists, whether they're Scottish nationalists wanting Scottish independence, or English or British nationalists wanting Brexit, or American nationalists wanting to build a wall along the border with Mexico, or Hungarian nationalists, or any of the other forces that you see around the developed world at the moment, the weakness of their case is actually highlighted. You deal with a global pandemic by countries working together. You meet the challenges of trade by countries pulling down barriers. So, for Scottish independence, Brexit is a serious economic blow to the people of Scotland, because 15% of Scotland's exports go to the European Union. Something in the region of 66 to 70% of the rest of Scotland's exports go to England, Wales and Northern Ireland. So, if it's bad to come out of a market that is 15% of your exports, it would be catastrophic to come out of one that's 2/3. And, in some ways, COVID-19 has given the SNP an opportunity to get off the hook, because it did allow them to say, that's it, because of this, we're not having an independence referendum this year. But that's never far from their consideration, and I think it will be a big part of the discussions that we have in a run-up to the Scottish elections next May.
And is there a split in the SNP regarding those that obviously fervently want independence to those that kind of it's not their primary goal? Is that, I mean, I don't know enough about the internal machinations of the SNP to know how big that fight is.
Well, the criminology of the SNP is fascinating, and I only ever see it from the outside, thankfully. But the split between the gradualists and the radicals has, that's a decades-old split within the SNP, and you now layer on top of that a whole number of different splits between the different personalities. So you've got Angus Robertson and Joanna Cherry, for example, in a fight to the death over the SNP candidacy in Edinburgh Central. I can't remember who said it about an American presidential election, but it was a great line. Said it's one of those fights where it's a shame there has to be a winner. So you've got these personality contests on top of what is already a fault line within the party. And all the indications are that is going to become more acute and more difficult to manage in the coming months. The hallmark of their political success in the last 10, 12 years has been their determination to maintain a front of unity. I get the sense that is beginning to change, and exactly where that change will take them will be interesting to see. The greatest strength that the SNP have, though, is still the weakness of the Labour Party in Scotland, because they are the party who would stand to pick up the seats that they could lose to a decent opposition. And that's that the SNP could lose to a decent opposition, and they are no more functional now than they have been at any time in the last 15 years. Maybe.
So it's interesting, isn't it, though, that you were saying before 11 MPs united, the two bigger opposition parties, as we know from the Labour Party's current problems, are split and splitting. So sometimes 11 who are focused and working together are more important than 200 who are looking internally.
Yep, absolutely. And, I think it seems to be something that's necessary in the way that political parties operate, that from time to time they have to have these moments of introspection. It's maybe something to do with the psychology of the group or whatever it is, I don't know. But every party does it from time to time. And the bigger the party, then the more dramatic these moments of introspection and splits then become.
So do you have to wait for your autobiography to find out what happened when you had 57?
I don't think there's anybody who would want to publish that. It was one of I always say I don't regret much in life, but one of the things I do regret is that I've not been better at keeping a written record of it, because we've lived through some quite remarkable times, and at the moment when you're in the middle of it, you think, well, I'm never going to forget this, but you do, and you forget the sequencing of conversations and meetings and the rest of it. And I just think in my own political career, because you pointed this out at the start, I was elected in June 2001. We were just coming out of foot and mouth, and in July 2001, I remember a conversation. Tony Blair had just been re-elected with a majority of 166, down from 172. The iron will, the discipline of the Labour Party at that time was absolutely phenomenal to watch from the other side of the House. And you could see nothing getting past them. And I said to one of my colleagues, you know what, I think this could be quite a boring parliament. And that was in July. In September, you had 9/11. You then had a bombing campaign in Afghanistan, a ground war in Afghanistan, the run-up to war in Iraq. The war in Iraq, we then remembered we were in Afghanistan. We then had a banking crisis, a credit crunch, a recession, a coalition government, an independence referendum in Scotland, Brexit referendum, and now we've got a global pandemic. You know, that boring parliament I thought I was in for in 2001 has just been on a one-way ratchet of intensity. Yeah, I would give my right arm for half an hour of boredom at the moment. And, you know, you sometimes have to take a step back and look at these big changes and, you know, understand that each one of them has had a consequence. And, you know, sometimes the understandable human reaction is to say, well, we want to go back to business as normal. We take comfort in what we know, when actually what you should do is to embrace change. You know, if our response to 9/11 had been different, for example, instead of doubling down on civil liberties and human rights, instead of that, if we had actually done more to tackle head-on the trade injustice between the developing world and the developed world, if we had taken on some of the double standards that we've operated in the Middle East for decades about Israel and Palestine, and those double standards are both sides of that argument. You know, there are Arab nations that have used the conflict in Israel-Palestine to deflect attention from their own internal problems. It's been a useful tool for them.
You sound like a liberal there, Alistair Carmichael. Keep it up, will you?
I can't help myself sometimes.
Well, we're coming near the end of our time. We've only got a few minutes left. But obviously, one of the key things Alistair also does is run the Whisky Club for the Lib Dems. Now, obviously, with conference being cancelled, it's been a very dangerous time for Alistair. He's probably got hundreds of bottles of whiskey lighting around his house.
Is that why we invited him on today, John?
Yeah, that's right. I did think about having a whiskey with me, but I thought, given it's 9 o'clock in the morning, it might not be appropriate.
Yeah, indeed. I have, let's just say, I'm carrying a lot of stock at the moment. And what I tend to do for whiskey is, you know, as I go around, I'll see an interesting bottle either online or else we'll be visiting family somewhere. I use there's that distillery nearby. My son, for example, now lives in Stirling. So go and have lunch at Deanston. So you go and have a lunch. Oh, there's an interesting distillery bottle and the rest of it. So I pick up stray bottles here and there, and I had a very good collection of them. And posted on the internal group for the Friends of Whisky, we should try and do an online tasting. And such was the response to this random thought that I then had to go around all the different sources where I'd picked up these stray bottles here and there, so that I could have enough to meet the demand. So yeah, whiskey is now going online.
Well, I'd have thought, you should really be converting it to hand sanitizer as it's alcohol, Alistair.
Well, there are a few of my whiskies that are effective for hand sanitizers, because to be effective with a hand sanitizer, it has to be over 60% alcohol by volume. If you think that most of your standard whiskies, your Grouse and Bells and whatever, are 40% by volume. So yes, we could possibly put it over to that, but it would be a sinful waste.
Why did I know you'd say something like that?
And but for the rest, the things that go up to 60%, I think it's another important part of the coping mechanism.
Indeed.
In dark, long evenings.
Well, I can just say from myself and Richard, thank you so much for your time, Alistair. I mean, I remember you came to speak at our local party so long ago now. I can't remember when it was, and you blew us away. You've always been an absolute trooper in regards to local parties and campaigning and membership and things like that. So thank you so much for coming on. Look after yourself. I am supposed to be going to Shetland and Orkney once it's over, because obviously my mum used to live there, and she's promised me that we will go up and visit at some point. So I expect to look around the local distilleries around there as well. But in the meantime, no
doubt you'll get some focus to deliver if you tell Alistair that you won't.
Yeah, absolutely. But thank you so much, Alistair. We really appreciate your time. Do look after yourself, look after your family, and stay safe. But thank you so much.
Thank you very much, John. Richard, I have thoroughly enjoyed it.
Excellent. Cheers.
Thank you so much to Alistair Carmichael for coming on. That's now 3 of our parliamentary party that we've done interviews with since the new year. Alistair always impresses me. He's been such a top bloke. He came and spoke to our local party, did a brilliant after-dinner speech, and he's just someone who's always available for the membership. So if you ever get a chance to see Alistair Carmichael in person, if your local party is doing an annual meal or something like that, do go and see him. He's such a top guy. And with everything that going on, it was really interesting to hear his Scottish perspective on things, with a massive year ahead in Scottish politics. But what are your thoughts, guys? Comment below. Did you agree with what Alistair was saying? Do you think that democracy is going to be kicking and screaming into the 21st century? Comment below. Share this podcast around as well. If you're watching on the YouTube channel, thank you very much. If you haven't yet tuned into the YouTube channel, go across YouTube, subscribe to us. Let us know what you think in the comments below. Give that YouTube video a like. Make sure you are subscribing to your podcast on wherever you get your podcasts. Make sure you follow the Lib Dem Pod on all our social media accounts at Lib Dem Pod on Twitter, Instagram and Facebook. And of course, most importantly, look after yourself. We'll have more episodes coming in. If you'd like to hear from anyone in particular, someone you think, I'd really like to hear from that person regarding what they do in the party, let us know. We've got loads of people lined up, and you'll have loads more podcasts coming through. But in the meantime, stay safe, and we'll see you on the next episode.